Okay, what is success in faith and church? And so we are talking about success or significance. And I hope that is meaningful for us and for those of us who are actively involved in church life. So we are going to try to define true success. Is that reaching certain goals in life? Is it striving for a certain status? Is it mainly financial? For some people, it would be. Or for us as Christians, is success more closely allied to spiritual growth, synonymous with spiritual growth, a matter of moving closer to Christ? And then when we look at the church, at the organization, what is success in church work, in evangelism? What if we are a worker in the church or an active elder or deacon? What is success as a church worker? For all of us, what is success as a believer in Christ? These are some of the things that I want to touch on in the next 40 minutes or so. For most people, the success is the achievement of a desired goal. There's a certain outcome that you want in your profession. You want to be a successful professional. People want to be successful in their personal life, their family. And sometimes that is the most important thing for people. I know I had somebody working with me at one point in time who told me, he says, I have not made a success of my life. He says, but I am a success in my marriage. I'm a success in my family. And I thought, well, that's good enough. Success for those in academic work, it's how many books you have written or how many times you have been quoted in other publications, things like that on the intellectual level, and success, cultural, social success. All these things have to do for most people with a success in life. But Albert Schweitzer told us, and you know Albert Schweitzer, the famous doctor and famous theologian also, that success is not always the key to happiness, but happiness is the key to success. There's quite a bit in that quote. How do we define success? Defining success in the context of church work and spiritual nurture is quite different from how success is usually measured in other areas of life like business or academia. And we're going to talk about that. Rather than focusing on numbers, performance, or visible achievements, in the context of church and faith, the definition of success should revolve around faithfulness, transformation, and alignment with God's purposes. And maybe the biblical term for having success is maybe more close to being blessed. These are some of the key things that we want to keep in mind. A truly successful person from a Christian perspective, I think, is someone who is living with a purpose, who acts with integrity, who is able to grow through adversity, who will contribute to the good of others, and who has both inner peace and an outer influence, outer impact. So this is a definition of success that I found somewhere, and that I thought is truly meaningful. A successful person in Christian terms is one who seeks first the kingdom of God, who walks humbly with him, that is with Christ, and who bears the fruit of the Spirit. True success for a Christian is not measured by worldly achievement, although that's not totally unimportant, but it's measured primarily by faithfulness, love, and service in accordance to God's purpose. Now, all this sounds very good, but what does it mean in actual practice? When we look at our denomination, at our church, then we see that there is a strong focus on numbers, that success is usually measured in terms of statistics and numbers. We like to talk about growth. Global growth is a success marker. And it's interesting, when there is no growth, we still talk about growth. We call it zero growth. And when we are declining, we talk about negative growth. But growth is the word that is always on the Adventist lips. Evangelistic goals are usually framed numerically. When we have a campaign, we hope for 100 souls. We hope for 200 new members. There is a goal that is framed numerically. And we do well in the church at every level at reporting. You know, many of you may have seen the annual statistical report of the General Conference, and it's a booklet of 100 or so pages, full with ciphers, and everything possible that we do in the church is measured and is put in statistics. Now, it's fair enough, even in the New Testament, there is an interest in numbers. When we look, there are several texts in the book of Acts where it says that the church grew, that numbers were added to the church. And so it is not totally illegitimate to talk about numbers. But I believe it becomes problematic when quantitative growth overshadows qualitative depth. If measuring whether we do well or not in the church is just, do we have more than we used to have, rather than is it more meaningful? Does it have a greater blessing, what we are doing? Leaders, pastors feel sometimes pressured to deliver numbers. And actually, in some areas in the world, there are certain rewards when pastors baptize a certain number of people. In one division, they used to talk about centurions, people who would baptize at least 100 people every year, and they would be honored in particular ways, and they might even get a free laptop or something. People pressured to deliver numbers. And then performance is then the key word, rather than faithfulness. Pastoral care and discipleship are sometimes sacrificed while we focus on numerical results. That is, I think, unfortunately, the case in many places in the Adventist denomination. Well, fair enough, it is difficult to measure success in religious organizations. How do you measure spiritual growth, spiritual health? It is much easier, and I accept that, to measure membership growth or decline, or even church attendance. attendance at evangelistic meetings, and institutional developments, and financial strength, budgets, growth in income, tithe, and offerings. That is much easier than it is to measure spiritual health, spiritual growth, spiritual nurture. In the Adventist tradition, numbers have always played a significant and an important role. Some years ago, I hit upon a particular book. Maybe some of you know. It's written by a Patricia Klein Cohen, and the title is A Calculating People, the Spread of Numeracy in Early America. And it's a very interesting book indicating how important in 19th century America statistics were becoming, and how things were expressed in numbers. And it's very interesting that even in our prophetic interpretation, of course, numbers play an important role. And I have often wondered whether this doesn't have to do with the fact that actually in the 19th century, in American culture, numbers were beginning to play such an important role. There is also, I believe, and of course, if you feel that as a European I should be careful speaking about this, but I think there is a certain amount of pragmatism and the philosophy of utilitarianism that promotes the use of statistics, of things that you can count, things that you can put in columns. And when we talk about numbers, there is a certain competition also, I believe, between denominations, and we measure growth or relative growth when comparing with other churches. Something that and maybe we can talk about that in the discussion, but sometimes that seems to be quite common in many countries for Adventism, is that often people who are successful in worldly terms, they show up on our boards, and they get important positions in the church and leadership roles. You see that often in local churches when offices have to be filled. We look very often at people who are successful in their profession, in their daily work, etc. And we see more at other levels in the church also that successful people, sometimes even rich people, they are considered when there are vacancies in boards and institutional boards. When we look at church publications and conferences, there is often quite a bit of emphasis on numbers, on statistics. We like to report success. And at a general conference, we actually have a sizable department of statistics headed by Dr. David Trim, who is a very capable person, and his reports actually at the GC session and at annual council, they are very informative. And the good thing about Dr. Trim is that in his reporting, he is not only mentioning the positive things, but is quite realistic. And that is not always true for all other reporting that is done. We like to talk about success in our evangelism. And then we point to things that have really, we feel, been successful. 2016, there was an evangelistic campaign countrywide in the Central African country of Rwanda. At over 2,000 sites, evangelistic activities were held, and this resulted in 100,000 plus baptisms. And of course, that was touted widely as a very successful evangelistic undertaking. More recently, in the spring of last year, there was a countrywide evangelistic campaign, PNG, Papua New Guinea for Christ, and lots of international speakers were invited, and at many sites, evangelistic meetings were held, and this campaign resulted in 300,000 plus baptisms in just a few months. And looking at some recent success in Latin America, in the Caribbean, earlier this year, it was mentioned that there were, in one campaign, 16,000 baptisms. East Africa had various campaigns, and they reported in 2024, last year, they reported 700,000 baptisms. Success really in the big numbers. And then, and some of you may know more about this than I do, but there is at present a Pentecost 2025 initiative in the North American division. The goal of this initiative is fostering a culture of evangelism for the entire country, for the entire continent. It's the US and Canada. And what I have gleaned from the information that I could find is that there are over 2,000 what they call proclamation sites. Lots of preparation, prayer meetings, materials printed, subsidies, and the various entities, division, GC, conferences, together, they have reserved some $40 million for this initiative. Now, it's too early to know what the results are of Pentecost 2025. But I wonder at what time, at what point will it be considered a success? And actually, the question that I'm very interested in is, will the results be critically analyzed, whether they are positive or not so positive? We will have to see what Pentecost 25 will be in terms of success. I believe that it is important that we measure success honestly. Now, that's not always the case. And sometimes the reporting is rather unbalanced. Things are missing, elements are missing. In 2023, so that is 2 years ago, there was a campaign, Europe for Christ. Now, I've written about that rather critically because it was announced as the greatest thing that was ever going to happen in Europe. Enormous amount of pre-publication, but then not much happened. And actually, the whole Europe for Christ initiative, as far as I have been able to ascertain, has perhaps a few hundred baptisms. Elder Ted Wilson went to Prague in the Czech Republic, and that was advertised widely. There was a lot of pre-publicity that the leader of our church was going to give the example how to evangelize even in a difficult place like secular Europe. And then after the first pictures of the meeting, which were taken in such a way that they would give the impression that the hall, where actually it was only partially filled, was filled maybe to capacity. But after that, we heard very, very little. And I believe that there was one person at the end baptized. So Europe for Christ, it was really the pre-public, the promotion of the campaign was very promising, but the success was very disappointing. But it seemed that we were very reluctant to actually talk about that and to actually tell the people that we did not get the success that we had expected. Now, what about the campaigns that I was just talking about in Rwanda and PNG, Papua New Guinea? Hundreds of thousands of people baptized. But the question is, how many stay? Now, I have some friends in that part of the world, and they are very direct and say, well, this really, the question is, how many will stay? How does this compare with average retention worldwide? Average retention worldwide is not all that good, but how will it be in Papua New Guinea? Now, that division is doing all kinds of things to try to make sure that not all these members run away again, but there is great doubt as to what the actual final result is. We seem to be reluctant to talk about that. Another example, there is this campaign to distribute hundreds of millions of copies of The Great Controversy. And we read stories in our publications about places where people have been distributing these books, but it's very difficult to get a picture of what is really happening. How many copies have been distributed so far worldwide? 10 million, 20 million, 100 million? We don't know. Paperback books or digital. And what have been the results? We hear incidental reports that here and there maybe a person has found a way to the church by reading the Great Controversy. And in the independent press, like Adventist Today and Spectrum, we also hear about some places where there has been negative reaction from the public. But the church is not very good in actually giving the church members a fair picture and measuring the real success of some of these big initiatives. I believe we must realize there are problems in the numbers, in the success that is displayed by the denomination. Current official membership is just over 24 million. The baptisms between 2000 and 2023 were over 30 million. But in that same period, we lost 13 million members who left the church again. And that is not including people who died or who went what we call missing. So there is this problem. Yes, we're growing, but we are not growing as fast as we sometimes are made to believe. And there have in recent times been major corrections in membership statistics. At one point, the South American division reduced the number of members by 1 million because they simply were not there. And in other places, some similar corrections would be needed. There is a significant amount of underreporting of death or what we call lost or moved, and some of the figures are really untrustworthy. Now, I was the secretary of the Trans-European Division for a number of years, and it was my job in those years to look at the way the membership figures were counted. And in those days, in those years, Pakistan was temporarily part of the Trans-European Division. and I went there quite regularly. And I wondered whether the membership that was reported was somewhat near the actual membership. So I told the conference presidents, or they're called mission presidents, they're field presidents rather. I told them that they should really make an effort to get the figures more realistic. And I gave them two criteria: that members had to be alive if they were to be reported as members, and each person could only be recorded once. I thought those were certain minimum requirements, that you only report a person once and that that person must be alive. But by simply using those two criteria, the membership went from about 10,000 to 6,000. And I still think that further corrections were necessary. And this is something that is not unique to Pakistan, but that is certainly a problem in many areas in the world where such differences between reality and what is reported exist. I believe it's important for the church to be honest about its numbers and to do what it can to really report reality. And why should we talk only of millions of hundreds of thousands of baptisms as successful? Now, just this Easter, it seems that there were more baptisms in the Catholic Church in Europe. I don't know how it was in America, but in Europe, there were more Catholic baptisms at Easter than has been the case in many years in the recent past. The Catholic bishops in the Netherlands, they spoke of a huge success. What was the success for the largest church, the largest denomination in the Netherlands? The success was they baptized about 500 people. That was for the whole country. And they spoke about a huge success. So, what is success? They believed that the Holy Spirit was really working and had given them that result. Some of you may remember that I wrote an article for the Adventist Today website about a Dutch pastor, Pastor Jolanda Aantjes. She lives in a small village called Hull, and she had been working several years in her church. And then at long last, she could baptize one person. And she was so grateful for this success. And that made me think that, what is success? Is that only large numbers, or can we measure success also in other ways? When we think about success and reality, some things maybe we should keep in mind. We like to think in terms of growth, but history shows that for most organizations, there are periods of growth and decline. And we have to accept that if that happens and be honest about it. It's even true that some religious movements that looked successful at one particular point in time disappear, are no longer there. Many organizations go through certain cycles. They start enthusiastic, they become big, they become well organized, but then there is decline, there is administration takes over, and you wonder whether some of these organizations can actually regain their previous strength. So could Adventism also be going through such a cycle in some parts of the world? Do we recognize that? Are we honest about that? rather than always somehow making what happens a story of success. I believe it's also important and good to realize that, yes, big denominations have more influence than small denominations, but there are some small denominations that still have a strong voice, that have also a very meaningful ministry. Mennonites, Old Catholics, Quakers, some others. And so Adventists do not necessarily have to be among the big denominations to be significant in what they do in their ministry. And then success may be something that we did in the past, and that may also be celebrated. I think in this context of institutions, some of our institutions have disappeared or are in trouble. And we don't like to talk too much about that because that does not show the kind of success that we want to talk about. But reality is circumstances change, and so does perhaps the need for particular institutions. And some Adventist institutions may disappear. That has nothing to do with the fact that the church is less successful than it was in the past, but simply circumstances are different. Some schools no longer function for a number of reasons as they used to in the past. Some of the health facilities can just not survive in a different climate. I'm thinking about an example. In Denmark, we had this famous health institution, Skotsborg. And when you drive north of Copenhagen along the road, along the coast, you still pass the buildings, the big estate. Skotsborg was really a major institution. But the kind of clientele that went there, they now take a plane and go somewhere where there is more sun. The clientele for that institution simply was no longer there. And there were a number of reasons why that no longer was a viable institution. So that has nothing to do with the fact that the church is on its return. Things simply change. And in our talk about success, we don't like that, but that is a matter. Well, that's a fact. Food factories, we have been successful with food factories, but these products, they have now become so common that the big food chains also have tried to get part of that market. And so our factories are no longer needed to the same extent. Our publishing houses, they have changed. Printing facilities, the printing processes have changed. And so the fact that we have no longer certain institutions is not just all bad. Often it is not because of failure, but through changes in society. And we may be thankful that many of these institutions have been a success, a blessing in the past, and have really helped build the church to what it is today. There's another thing that I want to mention when we talk about success in evangelism. And maybe some of you have heard of the James F. Engel scale. This is something that this evangelist developed, and that's a number of decades ago, but it's still very relevant. We think when we are doing evangelism, we are thinking of success in terms of there's somebody who didn't know Christ, and now that person is baptized and is a active member of the church. That is success. But Engel says that the process that people go through is often very long, and he actually has 15 steps from no awareness of God to in the top, sharing faith with others. And there are different steps in between. And this Mr. Engels, Pastor Engels, he makes clear that actually going from one step to the other is success. If a person who has no awareness of God now is having some awareness of God, is getting some interest in Jesus Christ, is deciding to investigate, to study the truth about Jesus, that is success. And so measuring success in our contact with other people maybe should be have a little bit more nuance than we usually give it. What is success in the local church? And now we're coming a little closer to home. Is it only increase in membership? Well, you know, the truth is that not all new members are part of a success story. Of course, we would like to see a church grow also in members, but it is not the only, and in some cases, not the most important element. The success is it a spiritual community? Is the preaching, the liturgy, the music, the art such that it helps people become more spiritual, that it nurtures a spiritual community? For me, a successful church is also a church that positively reacts to diversity, theological diversity, cultural diversity. A successful church is a church that is having some success, some results in retaining its youth, a church that becomes intergenerational. A successful church has effective, inspiring leadership and has a mission focus with social dimensions. Now, we could talk about that for the rest of this evening, but I believe that we should not merely define success in terms of membership growth or even church attendance. Success in ministry. What is success for a pastor? For somebody who has a job in the church or who has an important assignment in the local church? What counts as success? Are we talking in terms of a calling or rather a career? Maybe both, but the aspect of calling should be supreme. Is there success? It also has to do with job satisfaction. And many of us know that there sometimes is a problem with many pastors today to have job satisfaction. Success in being a pastor is working with a growing and that is spiritually growing and healthy congregation. It's nice to be respected as a speaker, as a pastor, and maybe we can call that a success if that is the case. But also the experience of collegiality, of being part of a team, personal growth. All these things are part of what we might call success, and I've got to put it between quotation marks. It is not just that you are able to win a large number of people or that you get the tithe income up, but there are lots of other things that are also part of what success means. And we can look at people in history and you look at them, have they been successful? They were certainly meaningful. They certainly had significance. But in terms of just worldly success, no, many of them were not. So when we talk about success, and that is, I think, about where my PowerPoint ends, success in discipleship. The question, how successful am I as a disciple of Christ? And then how do I measure my success? Is it that I can be active in public witnessing events in the I will go, the number of books that I sell, the number of pamphlets that I distribute, the number of Bible studies that I give? Is that how I measure my success? Important though some of these things will be. Do I measure my success in terms of active participation in church events? I hope that that is true for many of us, that we are actively participating in church events. Do I measure my success as a believer in actual charity? And I hope all of that is part of who we are and how we live our faith within the context where we are. But success is probably, do I and others, success is primarily see a steady growth in my spiritual life. It's difficult to measure, but that is how our life becomes significant, maybe, rather than successful. The most relevant question for our success, for our significance, is, do I fully trust in what Christ did and does for me? Because that would be the basis for everything I do and say that makes what I do and say significant. So, success. There are many ways of measuring things. And well, I've tried to indicate that measuring only by numbers and statistics is not the primary way. It's good to have statistics, it's good to have numbers, but it's not the primary way, the most successful indication of that we are truly significant in what we do in our lives and in our ministry for Christ. So I hope that can give a little bit of a basis for discussion. So is Gina taking over?
Gina is taking over.
Yep, Lauren's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Lauren.
Well, yeah, I always try to slip in here and let you know what's coming up. And next week is going to be a really big Sabbath for the Adventist Today team. In the morning at 10:30 Pacific time, 1:30 Eastern time, and you can translate that into your time wherever you are. I am going to be teaching the Adventist Today Sabbath Seminar, but I'm going to be teaching it from Loma Linda University Centennial Complex. There is another class that meets at the same time as we do, and I'm going to be teaching both of them. So I'll be teaching live to them at Loma Linda University and over the internet to all of you who are on our class. I'm going to be teaching, I think you'll find it interesting. I'm going to be doing an analysis of the founding story of our church, the most important story. And when I started digging into it, I was just amazed at how the most important story of our church, the Great Disappointment, continues to shape who we are to this very day. It's not just a a bit of history. It is the shaping story that has made us who we are and continues to guide our organizational decisions, our doctrines, everything that we do up to this time. And I'm going to be teaching that next week, same time. You'll get the same kind of link that you usually get. Just that I'm going to be in a different place and going to have a bigger audience because I'm teaching both live and here. Okay, that's the minor thing. The major thing is that we're all going to be in Loma Linda, and I started out by inviting Jonathan Butler to Adventist historian to talk about his chapter in the book, Reclaiming the Prophet. And then he started inviting people, and Larry Garrity started inviting people, and Jim Walters started inviting people. And what we ended up with was that at 2:30 Pacific time, write that down, 2:30 Pacific time, we're going to be hosting, Adventist Today is sponsoring a group of about five of the authors of Reclaiming the Prophet. And they're going to be doing a panel. Eric Anderson is going to be there. Others are going to be there. It's going to be live streamed. It's going to also be, of course, live. And this is happening for those of you who are in Southern California. Come on over to the Loma Linda University Church. Okay, I should make a distinction here. The morning class is happening in the Centennial Complex. The afternoon event is happening in a much larger room over in the University Church. So be aware of that. If you are in that area, you can come to either one of those. You're welcome. I would love to have some of you who are Adventist Today readers, ATSS participants, come on over to the Centennial Complex and join the class. I would just love to shake your hands and meet you. The afternoon event, though, you're going to have to go over across the street and go to the Loma Linda University Church. Got that? Two different venues. Okay, I just wanted you to have that background. So maybe we'll see some of you next week who are in the Inland Empire of Southern California. Should be fun. Oh, and by the way, several members of my team are going to be there. Bjorn Karlman is going to be there. Um, Lindsay Abston Painter, who writes for us a lot and is part of our team, several others. It should be fun. Oh, Ed Reifsnyder will be there, our board chair. Looking forward to meeting all of you. So let me.
Lauren, for those who will be joining remotely, can you tell me how the easiest way to access? Will it be printed in Adventist Today?
Already has been. If you look
Okay,
on
there'll
our
be a link and a
webpage,
password, just like we do for ATSS?
no, probably not. It's probably just going to be go ahead and sign in.
Okay.
It'll be a little different. So yeah, it'll be easy for you to get on. I will post the link in the chat after I finish talking here, okay?
That sounds great.
All right.
All right. Did you have a comment to make or a question to
Yeah,
ask?
I do.
Go ahead.
Reinder, that was excellent. And boy, you really hit a sore spot with me. I started ministry at that era that you are acquainted with too, when there were a lot of, to be a pastor meant to sit down at every workers meeting and have to report your numbers. I don't know if it was like that when you started, but it was like that in the United States when I started. It was painful. It was embarrassing. It was horrible. You had to come to a meeting in the afternoon or toward the end of the year, I should say, and they'd have what they'd call a banquet. And every pastor had to rise to his hind legs and stand up and say, I reached my Signs of the Times goal for the year. I reached my harvest and gathering goal for the year. It was just, and I was astonished. I mean, I grew up in the church. I had no idea that numbers were the main driver of everything that the conference did with pastors. And I often think back to it and I think, why didn't I just quit right then? Because I would go home from those meetings, Reinder. I would just be so depressed. It would take me 2 weeks to be able to get back up and go out and do my work
Mhm.
because they would belittle you. I mean, you'd stand up and say, I'm sorry, I didn't get my signs of the times goal, but I will get it. I promise you, I will get it. And then they belittle you right there publicly, tell you, well, you better get it. And then they take you aside afterwards, and the conference president would say, well, if you want to be ordained, you better get that signs of the times goal, and you better get your ingathering goal. It was, I got to say, it was abusive. So you hit really close to home, and I'm just
Well,
expressing my heart here.
it's even a little worse than what you say, Lauren, because in some places that I personally know of uh, in the world, there was so much pressure on local leaders to produce the numbers that there would be actually be baptisms where people would be hired to be baptized.
I have a friend in India who said his parents were baptized by that very method.
Yeah. So,
And to this day, he's cynical about the church, even though he married an Adventist woman and he continues to go. Yeah, it's terrible. Um, I
but
did something similar. I'll make a confession to all of you here. When I got to about the time I was supposed to be ordained, my conference president says, "I'm not going to ordain you unless you get a lot more baptisms." And I baptized some people that even as I was doing it, I knew that they probably wouldn't stay. I mean, a couple of them were actually probably not normal in intelligence, and I'm embarrassed about it to this day. But it if I hadn't, I'd be out of the ministry.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I want to say.
No, that's very interesting. And just on that last confession that you made, you have to wonder if the goal is baptizing people to remain as Adventist church members, or if the goal is to baptize people who are willing to give their lives to Jesus. And I think those may be two different numbers. And I think you can take solace in the fact that maybe you led people to Jesus, even if they didn't become rank and file Adventist church members.
I suspect that the leaders who are demanding this of me didn't even get that deep. I think they
Mm-hmm.
were looking at numbers on a chart, and that's
Mm-hmm.
it. And if the numbers were on the chart, they didn't care what happened in the local church. I don't know. I've got several colleagues on here, uh, Elder Widmer and Elder Hessel, who I've known for many years. I'd be interested in if they had the same experience when they started out. It was abusive.
But the leaders, of course, themselves were also measured in terms of the success of their fields.
Exactly.
So it was something that was just, it seemed, in the DNA of Adventism, growth, regardless of, well, yeah.
I was in a meeting. I'm sorry, I'm talking way too long here, but I don't see a lot of hands up, Linda and Mark. By the way, Mark, when you speak, tell us what you're going to be speaking about in several weeks. Um, I was in a meeting, and I remember this so vividly. I rode to the meeting with my senior pastor, and the union president stood up, and he held out this piece of paper, and I can still remember it, Reinder. It was was printed on pink paper. And he said, I see now remember, this was Dakota where all the churches were tiny,
Mhm.
communities were tiny. And he held up this piece of paper and he said, now I'm looking here and seeing that some of you uh, had some baptisms. all the guys in the big cities, of course. About a third of you didn't get any baptisms, and some of you actually lost people. And he stood there and he said, that means that 2/3 of you pastors could be dead and buried, and it wouldn't make a bit of difference to the work of God in this church.
Hmm.
I'll never forget that, because we were driving home with my senior pastor, and I looked over at him and he was sobbing. This man who was, 20 years older than me, he was sitting there and sobbing and saying, I try so hard, I try so hard. And it brings tears to my eyes to this day to think about how that hurt him.
Mhm, mhm,
So, I mean, this is the church that I started ministry in.
mhm.
Very sobering. Linda, I'm always interested to hear what you have to say. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Maybe you already did. Can you hear us? All right. Well, Linda's unmuting. I'm going to just say we're going to try to have people ask questions earlier on instead of waiting till the last minute. We're kind of hoping we can let Reinder go by 12:30 today, although he may be willing to stay. But get your questions in early. Linda, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you, Doc. Thank you,
Perfect.
Gina. Thank you, Dr. Reiner. That was an awesome presentation. How do we measure success? Well, I'll speak about myself. I've been an Adventist a long time. I've been in school most of my adult life, earning one degree or another. I've just completed my doctorate almost a year ago, and I thought that was success. I was going to take a sabbatical for about a year until 2026, and then start back working. Then my demons caught up with me. And I've been in therapy for a good while, off and on throughout most of my life. And and I'm also in recovery along with that, dual diagnosis. And in this recent, and I've been a nice Adventist woman, use nice language and everything. In this recent session, I was back to 19 years old, cussing like a sailor, using the F word and the F word at someone who had raped me, taken away my virginity, taken away my youth, taken away the things that I should have had that other young women had. And I think that's what drove me to want to complete as much education as I could, because as much as, well, we see stuff on the news, and it's even worse because people recall from you as if you got a disease, as if you're going to be the one to rape them since you've been raped or assaulted. And I was between 12 and 14 years old. I was 12 when it started, and 14 till I was 14. And the court with some of that stuff. But I thought I was successful. But when I graduated with my doctorate almost a year ago, my demons were still waiting. And I can say my beautiful daughter, and I texted her this morning, just the raw data, the F words and everything. And she texted me back, Mom, you're healing. And that's a good thing. I mean, she doesn't hear me cursing. My daughter doesn't even see me get angry. But I don't feel bad. I don't feel ashamed. I feel like those were the only words I needed to use. I'm not going to use them right now. I'm not going to hurt y'all ears. But that to express my profound, if I'm considering this a success, that this is a breakthrough, that this is a breakthrough that those women are not getting from Jeffrey Epstein, didn't get from him.
Mhm.
I'm going to stop now because I'm going to cry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing your personal story. I'm going to go to Mark Carr. Mark, can you unmute?
Yes,
There
thank
we
you, and
go.
thank you, Linda. I'll also chime in and thank you for being so present, so very real with us. That is part of success, is it not? And Reinder, thanks so much. Any chance I get, I like to tune in and engage with you. I just so appreciate your work through the years. Um, I also had pastoral experience, and like Lauren and like you, and every month had to fill out the forms, how many Bible studies, how many baptisms, how many sermons, all that sort of thing. What's striking to me now in the healthcare corporation within which I work, the exact same reality is in play. The exact same reality. Service lines is the business language within healthcare. And if a service line is not meeting its EBITDA margins, it doesn't matter if they make profit or not. To the corporation, if you don't meet your margins, your percentages, you're not successful. Or so the message comes down. And I've seen corporate executives who are extraordinarily successful at bringing the company to a profit level, excuse me, who are deemed unsuccessful because they don't meet the margin that the corporation wants. So part of what I think is a reality for us in Seventh-day Adventism is that America, and maybe it's true in Europe in some contexts, I don't know, but in America there is an obsession, and I use that word purposefully, an obsession with success of the sort that means excessive profits. And I say excessive on purpose, not just profit, but more profit than is possible. I taught MBA students at Loma Linda, and the very first question I posed to them in class was, is there a percentage profit that should be deemed immoral, should be deemed excessive, should be deemed grossly unfair? And they didn't know what to do with the question. There is no framing in the American mind to think that there's too much of something, particularly money, right? And as Lauren invited me, I put in a tentative title for November 15th. If I can now, I can't find it now. Maybe you'll see it in the chat thread. We're going to talk about tidy narratives and settled facts, and how history and science reveal that it's all much more messy than we actually think, particularly about gender, sex, and marriage in the Christian tradition. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm going to ask Dr. Hemmings to unmute.
Well, maybe I
Oh,
can
go ahead, Reinder. You wanted to make a response.
to what Mark says. And it's interesting that you should mention that in the system in which you're working, you're recognizing the same things that we have been talking about. And I'm not familiar with that system, of course, and I would think that it's more of a business than maybe a church entity. But still, if it's an Adventist entity, a Christian entity, then one would hope that success is not only measured in those terms that you mentioned. Yeah, I should say that when I look at where I'm currently in the Netherlands Union, and this may be true for other fields as well, that the church, we hear reports that the church is doing well. But usually what is mentioned first is that tithe income has gone up. It's very pleasant that tithe income goes up, and I hope it will actually translate also in a little bit more pension than maybe is currently the case. But I find it almost repulsive if that is the first thing that we think about, that it's going well with the church when income goes up, then I think we are not really appreciating what it means to be the Church of God. Yeah.
That's a very interesting observation. Dr. Hemmings, tell us what you've got today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Not camera ready. I'm taking a Sabbath rest. I've been running all year and a lot more running to do, so I'm just taking a Sabbath rest today.
You're allowed.
Yeah. Thank you, Reinder, for reminding us that sometimes we do measure success in ways that may not be appropriate to the real spreading of the gospel. Lauren, in fact, I don't know, they probably still do that kind of checking on how many souls you won in Jamaica. I think up to the time I left there, people were giving incentives for how many souls they win. And my sister belonged to an Adventist church where oftentimes the stewardship director would come in, visit the churches, and just plain bully them over returning their tithe, you know. There's a story of two pastors in two different eras in Jamaica. Earlier era where a member won a sweepstake, and he told the pastor he won the sweepstake, and of course the pastor thought it was gambling, and so he damned him to hell. He didn't want him in the church anymore. And then later there was a other member who won the lottery, and the conference president was told so and so won the lottery, and the conference president said, "Has he paid his tithe yet?" So it all depends. Some have a different approach to that. But while we tend to have some distorted understanding of success in our church, I think there are several layers to what we may deem success in Adventism, because yes, indeed, many people find their way. They find hope, after bruised and traumatic lives. And God bless you, Linda, for your story. And at the same time, um, in many congregations, members can be traumatized just from the way the Adventist message and doctrine is being preached, which to me is plain failure. There are a lot of people who leave the church because they're traumatized by the way we teach and preach the message. And then there's, on the other hand, where Adventism has built a vast middle class because of its educational system, where many people, for example, in my country, there are many people who never get into a tertiary or a high school at a certain age. And in other countries, I think. And a lot of people would not have a chance in the ordinary state system, have had a chance of really building a life from almost illiteracy to going to doctorate, becoming, physicians and lawyers. And so I see where, I don't know if you call that success, but Adventism has all around the world built this vast middle class from simply its philosophy of, education of everybody, being able to rise and live a certain quality of life. So I see success there as well. So I'm saying there are several layers to our failure and our successes. I don't know what you think about that, Brian, there.
I think that is an important point that you add to the story, and maybe I have not emphasized enough that, of course, not all success as we measure it in terms of education, getting an education, having a good job, etc. Not all that is certainly not bad. In fact, as you mentioned, that is something that we can be happy about. And I'm glad that you brought that up, that we don't give people a sense of guilt when they are successful in terms of what society calls success, that somehow they have missed out on it. But as you probably also would underwrite, that measuring success only in terms of numbers as we tend to do in the church too often, and also in our personal lives, then we are missing a very important aspect of what success, significance can be. But thanks, Olive.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Ed Reifschneider and ask him to unmute. Ed.
Thank you. Reinder, a question. It has been reported that at the recent annual council of the General Conference, that President Kohler made a statement that everything in the church, money, institutions, real estate, human resources, all existed for a single purpose, which is to prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus. That's a fairly narrow definition of a church or spiritual fellowship. How do you think that kind of attitude, which probably permeates quite a bit of our church, affects the use of measuring success? I could say, for example, that if our church grows by 1 million membership a year, while the population of the world is growing by 70 million a year, we're probably not doing very well at market penetration, if I can use a business term. How do you think this singleness of purpose of preparing the world, which frankly sounds a little egotistical to me, if that's our sole purpose, how does that influence what we measure and how we deem success? Right now, I'd say we're failing.
Well, again, when you use numbers, you can look at these numbers from a different perspective. What we hear is that the church is successful because now there is, I think, one Adventist for every 300 people in the world, whereas there used to be one Adventist for every, 500 and for every 1,000. So we are doing better and better. At the same time, we are not told that every day about 350,000 new people are being born. So, and as you say, the population is going up dramatically. So, finishing the work, as we call it, has become much more problematic than it has been, in spite of all the success stories. And, well, I've become more and more convinced that this term finishing the work is something that we should just do away with. We should be witnesses of what we believe in word and deed, and whatever happens for the rest of it. And we are not the only ones actually in the world, I believe, who are preaching the gospel.
Right.
We are a core of the universal church of God. And how that is going to work out as far as finishing the work is concerned, that is something we can happily leave to our Lord and not worry about. When Kohler says that everything should be for the mission of the church, then I think people should ask him, what does he actually mean by mission? Does that actually mean that it is all preaching the three angels' messages in the old traditional way with the same terms? Is that the mission? You would sometimes get the impression that that is how it is being translated by some.
Right.
Or is it everything in the church, what we do, should have a spiritual undertone? If that is what is meant, then I can happily agree. if it means mission in the sense of using all the traditional things that we have and investing our money in campaigns, in initiatives, etc., without worrying too much about the spiritual depth of what we are about and what we do, then I'm worried. Now, I think that we can have a little hope that what we have seen so far since the accession of Köhler to the presidency and what we have heard so far from the annual council gives a little hope that there is somewhat of a shift in what I feel is the right direction. But I would rather like to know how it's going to work out and what this actually means, what you refer to. Everything must be in the service of the church, service of mission. It depends what he means with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's an interesting response. Sherry. I'm sorry. There you are. Go ahead and unmute. There you go.
Okay.
There.
Okay. Well, I have some hesitancy to follow Ed, but I'll go ahead. Two things. I know must have been 35 years ago. I was a social worker for a group of patients who had chronic illnesses, and I had an Adventist minister as one of my patients there, and I appreciated that the church administration allowed him to continue in his job, even though he wasn't able to do as much as they thought he could do. But he had the same things that Lauren talked about, that he had to go to the ministers' meetings, and he never had the baptisms or the the convictions, the changes that he wanted. And he felt like a total failure. And I tried to help him switch that around and say, you're managing a job that probably needs 3 people. And so what if you don't have baptisms? Just focus on the positive.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first my first thought. The other thing is more personal. And I spent probably 25 years, my middle ages, working with the Association of Adventist Women. And my whole goal for doing that was to get women ordained. And obviously that was not successful. Since in general, the church doesn't have women ordained. And so there have been times when I have really felt like all the energy and time and money, time away from my child, who will still talk to me about all the conferences I put on and what I put into that. She's 42 now. I felt like it was, I felt like it was a waste of my energy. I could have worked on something else, put more time into my family. And I'm not trying to drop names, but I'm friends with Mary Kay, and she and I were talking about it. And I expressed those feelings. And, she said, look at the women that you did support, the women in ministry from foreign countries that you brought to the United States and allowed to speak and have the acceptance that at least at some level they got in America as opposed to Central America or wherever they were from. And so that did, to some extent, help me change. And there were times when I was doing it when I felt like, well, these women they want to serve God and they need somebody to support them, and I can do that to some extent, but there's still another layer of feelings where I feel like I failed at that. Now I have many other areas in my life where, you know, I felt like much of a success, but in that area, it's very hard, of course, to feel like all the energy I put into it was worth it. So that's all. Not a big deal. I mean, somewhat a big deal to me, but thank you. I really enjoyed your talk, Render. And I almost didn't even come today because I thought, I don't know, success. Do I really want to think about that? But I'm glad I did. And thank you.
Well, I think you said the right thing to that pastor and told him that maybe he did not reach the kind of success that he was expected, but that he was significant in what he did. And when you talk about your work for the ordination of women, and we are all very sad, of course, that still has not materialized. I remain hopeful that somehow it will happen. And it will happen if more unions around the world are willing to just do what one or two unions have already done. And then there is no way of stopping it. So I hope that is going to happen. But what you have done may not be successful in terms of having the ordination officially approved. But I think that people would say that your work has been of significance to many women in the States and around the world. So I would say, don't count success only in terms of such a goal that has been totally achieved, but as something towards the achievement of the goal that where you certainly have played a significant role. So keep on pushing for the ordination of women.
Thank you for that, Reinder. And I just want to join in, and I don't know about in the world church, but in America, we're very focused on goals and getting results. And in the last 10 years, I've noticed that people are extremely concerned about what legacy they've left. What's my legacy? And I just want to go down in history as a person who didn't leave a legacy, but maybe I was a person that was kind to other people and that made a difference in the life of other people. And I suspect, Sherry, that that's where you're at. And I think that making your life something that has to be chartable or legacy acknowledged is a mistake. So I was interested to hear your topic today, Reinder, because that's something that's been on my mind quite a bit.
A desire to be remembered as somebody who has been significant, I think, is legitimate. And that, when I look at myself, I hope that, when I'm no longer there, that people would say that some of the things that he did and he did say were significant. I think the best legacy that a person can have.
Ed, I've asked you to unmute here. There you go. Go ahead.
Thank you, Reinder, for showing some of this arbitrariness, I would call it, or you would call it, as to how our church measures. Now, numbers they're just an abstract thing, so what do they really mean? My wife and I were discussing what would happen if we got dementia, and how would we look after each other, and how would we deal with each other, support each other. And so I went on the MOCA and the cognitive self-assessment test site and did 3 different cognitive tests. And we've been forgetting things, and I was I had reached the point where I thought, I mean, you can get this professionally done, obviously, by your doctor or someone else, but I just did 3 different tests. And one of those sites is a professionally recognized one where you can do self-tests. Anyways, to make a long story short, I got very good results, 88 out of 100 or on one and 90, over 90 on the other 2 out of 100. So I was thinking about your presentation and I thought maybe there's a better way to assess the health of the church because of the health of the church members. A healthy members, or the degree to which the members are not healthy, would give a good idea of where the church is at. So while you were talking, I came up with an arbitrary list here. Am I happy? Do I have a purpose as a disciple of Christ? Do I feel I belong and am welcome in my local church? Can I help others out in the church or outside of the church? Do I feel comfortable with the priorities in my church locally and corporately? How is my spiritual life? How is my family life? How is my social life? How is my mental well-being? How is my physical life? Am I making disciples for Christ? Do I or my local church make a difference in our local community? And am I a better person for belonging to this church? And if there was a site like I did with the cognitive assessment, where people just could go in and have a list and determine where they feel they're at in the church, that might be more of a valuable thing than going to arbitrary statistics. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that you're totally right that the health of a local church depends on the health of the individual members, spiritual health. And the sad thing is that we often have some members that are not healthy or may even be toxic. And we spend a lot of time trying to keep them on board. And while we do that, some other people just give up because they don't want to belong to a group of people where there are always issues. And so I wished that, of course, we try to give pastoral care to all people who are in our midst, but that we would not prioritize the people who are difficult and who are actually unhealthy and who might be happier elsewhere, but that we help those that are relatively healthy to become healthier still. And that is important, I think, for the health of a local church. And you're right, it depends not so much on an increase in numbers, but on you made a whole list, and maybe there are other things that could be on the list or in a different order. That's all right. But trying to assess somehow how we can help people to be to grow in their spiritual health, that will help the church to be more successful, be more significant.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Ray and Bobby and ask you to unmute. There you go.
Reinder, in the chat and in your presentation, a lot of the issues and problems have been identified, and somebody brought up in chat, so what are the solutions? So if you were, say, on a committee or even president, what do you think might be an appropriate goal for the organization versus the undefinable one that they have set up, in my opinion. What would be something you would feel that could really help and say, here's what we need to do, people?
Nothing like putting them on the
Well,
spot.
that is a tough question to answer. And it would be a tough job to be in the shoes of Pastor Köhler, and it would be a tough job even to be in the shoes of leaders at other levels. But I have, at the levels where I have worked, always tried to be tolerant, to be clear and authentic myself, to not beat about the bush where I stand myself on certain issues, but to give space to people, and to try to encourage the things that I feel are worthwhile, and try to get a discussion going about things that are not going so well. So for the world church, I think it's important that we diminish the polarization that we find in the church, and that we bring about a certain amount of tolerance for diversity, and not only diversity in the way we dress or in the way we have certain cultural habits, but also diversity in how we explain certain things. And we have major issues. Well, no, let me say it differently. On the basics of the Christian faith and the basic of the Adventist faith, there is a lot of unanimity. But there is so much shouting and so much noise about secondary issues. And I would certainly try to work with other people in order to try to diminish that kind of infighting, needless controversies, etc. I don't know whether that would be a good beginning, Ray.
That's interesting. And I'm just going to throw in my 2 cents here, because I think you talked a little earlier about change and the church changing. And if there's such a reluctance for the church to change, even if it's arguably to move forward, sometimes I think change in the church is perceived as apostasy or something anti-Christian. And I think that's, I don't know if it's unique to Adventism, but it's hard to move forward.
True. There are lots of people who are against change and who want to have tradition and, historic Adventism and all the rest of it. But there are also lots of people who are looking for change. And even leaders who are in agreement with them are often reluctant, because they feel that maybe if they give too much support to those who want change, that they might lose some of the others. And well, I would say again, sometimes I think we support the wrong group. And we should be a little bit more courageous and think, well, okay, if we lose some, or at least the support of some that want to stay in the past, well, that is keeping them on board is too high a price for us to move into the future.
I'm just going to point out that for individuals who are able to change are the ones who live the longest. And I don't know if that says anything about the longevity of the church.
Okay.
Circumstances change. Our society changes. Can you move with it, or are you always pushing the boulder uphill?
Well, if it's true that people who are in favor of change live the longest, then I should become 110.
All right, with that comment, I'm going to go to Ron and ask him to unmute. Ron, are you there for us?
Yes, thank you. It's been
Great.
enjoyable to be part of the discussion, hearing what's going on there. Thank you for that presentation. As you indicated, there are no easy answers for this, and it's easy for us to denigrate the church because it acts like a business or tries to act like a business, although often it's a poorly run business. Um, but the fact that we are Seventh-day Adventists, have the name Seventh-day Adventist, and got organized is because our early founders realized it is a business and needs to be handled as a business. I think some of the challenge comes about because we try to make business decisions or cover the business decisions as spirit-led when they aren't necessarily spirit-led. They're just business decisions that need to be made, and sometimes hard business decisions have to be made, compounded by the fact that there's so much insecurity in those of us who get ordained and are leaders and have people looking up to us. My background is in education. I never did go to the seminary. My master's degree is an MBA in accounting. And my insecurity would come out every month as I looked at the financial reports. Even though nobody else put that pressure on me, I would put that pressure on me. If finances were improving, I felt successful as a pastor. If they weren't, I would wonder, what am I doing? Why aren't people supporting? What should I do differently? And it was an internal struggle that I had, even though I would say, okay, don't make this a point, don't make this a point. Church boards would say, if finances are bad, you need to give a stewardship sermon. And I'd say, no, I'm not going to give a stewardship sermon and guilt people into giving money when the issue is that we need money, because then it just becomes a manipulative thing. And so I would only give stewardship sermons when the things were going well. And yet inside of me, I'm eating up every month looking for that financial report and how it's doing. And I suspect that insecurity runs rife throughout our denomination and doesn't stop at the pastoral level, but up to the conference, union division, GC level, that drives so much of what we do. And it's really how we deal with that, I think, is some of the answer to what we're looking for. And there are no easy answers to that. It's something that's been a lifelong struggle for me as a pastor. And I still don't even have any answers for that. But I think the discussion needs to continue, and very good points are made in how we differentiate between a business entity that is also spirit-led and how the different decisions in regard to that. And no easy answers, but I think some of the answers in continuing having these types of discussions. So again, thank you for facilitating that discussion. I think it's very vitally important.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, again, here also is a point that is important. Of course, there are business aspects, and we need people who are able to and competent to look after those business aspects. But and I think you agree that we must be sure that our priority is that we never forget that a church is a spiritual entity, and success is not measured primarily in terms of numbers, but goes deeper than that.
I think there's a kind of a conflation between the church as a business and an actual neighborhood church.
Mhm.
Those are two different things, I think. And I'm just, from my own experience in my career working with people who have drug addiction or other antisocial behaviors, frequently get to a place in their life where they have burned all their bridges with their family, with their friends, just by their bad behavior. And oftentimes we'll get into a 12-step group or some kind of a support group to try to bring them back from the brink of very, very dire situations. And the ones who I've observed, the ones who are the most successful are the ones who have a support system, the ones who can put people in place who will support them in their recovery. And I see the church's value as being a support system for each other. And if it's a church where people are busy shaming others and belittling others and backbiting and judging, I think that that needs to go, and there needs to be a change or a shift to where you see the church as a hospital for people who are broken, people who need propping up, and maybe move for the local congregation to become more of an encouraging and support group for every member. I think that would be a more successful model. I'm interested in hearing your reaction.
Yes, and that is what the church is. And unfortunately, there is in recent decades more and more business talk about in the church organization. In the days of when Robert Falkenberg was the president of the General Conference, he proposed that presidents be now called CEOs. Now, it goes through, but you see that there are now, rather than being secretaries of departments, they are now all vice presidents for something. And there is more and more business language. Those of us who have been to leadership seminars in the past, they have noticed how much of the language and much of what is being discussed reflects that what is also in the business world. And yes, we can learn from the business world, and there are things that we can imitate, maybe even language that we can use, but we must remain sure that the church is a spiritual entity where things are measured in different ways. But yeah, the point that you make, that the church, there are different models for the church, and it is a school, and but it is also a hospital, yes, and it's a support group, and we must make sure that it is that at a local level, and that the higher levels support that support system.
I appreciate your comments. I'm just going to say we have one last hand. If anybody wants to get a comment in, this is the time to raise your hand. I'm going to go to someone known only as iPhone and ask if you can tell us who you are and where you're calling from. Go ahead.
My name is Ruth Peters, and I'm...
Oops, you've muted, Ruth. Can you unmute again? Ruth, you have hit the mute button. Can you hit unmute again? Oops, that's iPad.
Okay. I think I am. I'm calling from California, and I am so touched by this message, Reinder. I always like to follow you whenever I can. I want to respond to Sherry Craig. I know Sherry for many years. We worked together at Loma Linda Medical Center as a social worker. And I remember her passion and desire to see that women become ordained in the church. And she was active in the Adventist Association of Women. At that time, I wasn't ready, but after I retired, I was praying, what do I need to do to feel a time that I can serve and continue this fire in my heart of evangelism, but how? And it came out, as I now can tell Sherry, you planted a seed on me to the point that today I lead a Zoom monthly meeting with theologians in Latin America that have studied theology, but now they are chaplains or professors, leaders in the church. They don't, at this point, there is no ordination for them. But in these meetings, we converse, we dialogue with pastors in the North American division. And there is this dialogue that they're having, and it's growing. And I say, Sherry, you started something that I never knew that it could go to the Spanish-speaking Latin American women, where they are so ready to move on and needing the support emotionally, spiritually, that's happening now. Now, would I see women ordained in my lifetime in Latin America? I don't know. But I like this theme of success because I would not be able to measure. But I would say, Sherry, there is a lot of things that are happening directly connected with you, because when I've talked with you, I get this fire going. Women need to be treated equally. Would I see that? I don't know. But numbers are not important. What is important is my relationship with God, and continue that on with the women that are also so ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was so great. Reinder, did you wish to comment?
Well, I think my only comment would be amen. And you say whether you will in your lifetime see that women are ordained in Latin America. I am hopeful and I'm confident that it will happen. And just let's keep on working for it. Let's keep on talking about it, praying about it, and pushing our leaders to be more courageous. And it must happen, because for many, the church loses credibility if that problem is not solved.
Thank you.
I appreciate those words. And I just want to say that one thing I think that Adventism gets very right is it's planting a seed in everyone's heart of being a person willing to serve. Wherever you go, however you do it, just a willingness to serve others. And I think that that's very worthwhile.